Hello and welcome to Everything's Fine, Probably, your weekly antidote to bad news, where we spend around an hour proving the world isn't quite as doomed as your news feed would have you believe. I'm Jim, as always. I'm joined by Stuart and Gemma. And every week we go looking for reasons to be optimistic, because while bad news travels at the speed of Wi-Fi, good news usually forgets where it left its keys. So to help us do that, we're joined by comedian, musician, writer, broadcaster, and celebrity mastermind winner. It's Mitch Benn.
Thank you. Probably the proudest entry on my resume is the celebrity mastermind winner. I revised for that harder than I revised my A-level stuff.
Well, it paid off.
It was something like the fourth or fifth time they'd asked me to be on. On every previous occasion, they'd bin me at the last minute, because what has obviously happened is the genuinely famous person who couldn't make his bloody mind up eventually went, oh, okay then. So it's just like, oh, good, thank Christ for that. We don't need Mitch Benn. And so the year I finally got on, I thought, right, there's no bloody way I'm losing this. So, I worked very hard for that.
And what a great specialist subject to spend your time revising. Peter Cook.
It was Peter Cook, yes. I went for Peter Cook. I did. It was a fairly obvious choice in many respects. I'm sure it took a lot of people quite by surprise, because it's not one of my more publicly well-known obsessions. People do know about my obsessions. I have several obsessions, and they're generally quite public-facing as obsessions go, and quite a few that aren't. But less said about that, the better. But no, I'm a bit of a student of that whole era, but he was also the only person I could think of I'd read two different biographies of. Because I think, what you really read for something like Mastermind is, what is it I know pretty much everything that there is to be known about, And obviously people know that I have various obsessions, people know that I'm a big Doctor Who fan. I know quite a lot about Doctor Who, but you put me in a room with Toby Haydock and I've never bloody heard of Doctor Who, same kind of thing. It's like, there are the people who know way more about all those things than I do. But I was thinking, I've probably exhausted all their potential avenues of research as well. Because you think, if I've read both these books, that's probably all they've got to go with anyway. But what's interesting, of course, is you're allowed to tell people that you're doing it, but you are not allowed to tell people what your subject is. Because, of course, the minute you do that, all your mates on social media will start running questions at you. And then the question compilers can't use any of that. Because now they know whether or not you know the answer to those. You see what I mean? It's like, you can't tell them what your subject is, until it goes on. But I've got a few funny stories about that, but I'm eating into valuable podcasting time. So if they come up organically in the course of conversation, we can bring them up again.
Fair enough. Well, Mitch, we will almost certainly talk about Doctor Who, because like you, I'm a big Doctor Who obsessive as well.
Yeah.
But some things we will be talking about. We're talking about you growing up, not realising that you were autistic and discovering this late in life, writing songs that unexpectedly resonated with entirely new audiences, maybe life before, during, and after the BBC, and some probably a bit of Doctor Who in there as well. But as you say, we'll just meander along. We'll take tonight's episode as less of a straight line and more of a scenic walk where someone keeps spotting interesting birds, where everything's fine, probably. Mitch, what's one thing that's made you think that actually everything's probably fine this week?
This week, I don't know, Piers Morgan turning on Nigel Farage, maybe.
Yeah, that's fun, wasn't it?
That's put a bit of a smile on my face, it has to be said. I mean, it is a bit of one of those, it is a bit of a sort of an Alien versus Predator moment, if only they could both lose. You've got to say that when you start incurring the wrath of those kind of people, and this is it, I mean, it's like, it would be lovely if people could see through this fake populism that guy's been peddling for the last 20 years. It really is. I mean, he's done so much damage to this country. It's almost incalculable. I mean, he's achieved what everybody who ever tried to dismantle Britain wanted to do and never succeeded. He turned us against each other. The IRA never managed that. The Nazis never managed that. And he did. He turned us against each other. And for that, he should not be easily forgiven. But at the end of the day, the thing which was always going to, I think, the thing which will one way or another be his undoing is his own ego, because at the end of the day, that's all any of this has ever been about.
Yeah.
That's why he can't leave it alone. That's why he can't farm it off to anybody else. That's why Reform is not actually structured as a political party. It's a private company. He's the chief shareholder. So there is no mechanism for removing him as leader. People don't seem to realize that. The membership can't, every other political party, the membership can vote the leader out. Not Reform. They can't. He owns it. And he's the chief shareholder in that political party. So it's, and that's why Rupert loaded on stuff to do, Restore, which is hilarious that they actually may do them some serious damage, live by faux populist right-wing bullshit, die by faux populist right-wing bullshit. It'd be lovely if somebody comes and out right-wing populist bullshits Farage and actually ends up taking enough off the lunatic end of his vote to actually screw Reform up in the next elections. But what was really what actually really restored hope was a good couple of months ago when the Greens won. I keep saying the Galton and Simpson by-election. It's not. It was the Galton and Denton by-election. But I keep saying Galton, which probably means nothing to anybody listening to this who's like not 20 years older than me.
But weren't they Steptoe and Son? Is that right?
And Hancock.
Hancock, primarily Hancock, and then they did Steptoe.
Yeah.
They were the writers of Hancock and Steptoe's Galton and Simpson. Yeah, they're both gone now. They lived to a ripe old age, both. But yeah, it was because what was really starting to annoy me was this narrative of inevitability that the right-wing press were trying to build up around Farage and Reform. That it was just a done deal. He is your next prime minister. Resistance is futile. Accept your fate. You can't change the past even when the past hasn't happened yet. You know what I mean? And it was just this narrative of fate, inevitability that somehow just trying to get us used to the idea that he was already the prime, so that we wouldn't question it, I guess, And then when Matt Goodwin imploded spectacularly in Gorton and Denton, and they really made a complete tit of themselves there, and a nice young lady who just looked like a play school presenter won, which is adorable. Well, she did. She really looked like she was presenting play school.
She does. I hadn't really thought about it.
She really does. You could just see her with big Ted under one arm and Hamble under the other. But the point is, she came dancing in and blew them out the water. And, oh God, I was happy about that. I mean, Makerfield in retrospect was less of a surprise because one of the he said, why do they keep fielding such terrible candidates? And I would say your argument presumes they have any other kind of candidate.
Absolutely.
Well, I don't think they've got any kind of vetting process, have they? It's just kind of put your hand up. Who fancies doing it?
Well, they fielded a bunch of AI candidates in 2014.
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
They fielded a bunch of non-existing candidats, knowing that they were never going to win, so it's never going to be an issue. They were just basically putting loads of leaflets with made-up people's AI photos on. I mean, that's why, in many respects, in actual fact, while I think if Andy Burnham does get crowned, maybe by the time this goes out, maybe he'll be Prime Minister. I mean, because it looks like Labour are just going to do the coronation thing and not, subject themselves to the...
Don't think anyone's going
But in actual fact, if anybody wants to oppose it, they've got to get 81 MPs, and nobody get 81 MPs. So even if they want a popular leadership contest, it looks like constitutionally they can't actually have one. Because of course, the minute this happens, everybody on the right will immediately say general election. Now, of course, fortunately, the Tories completely destroyed the case for that by doing it 3 times in the last 5 years and not having a general election.
Exactly.
But
all they can really say is that Labour called for one.
Yeah.
One of the reasons it might actually be a good idea to have a general election is there is no bloody way that Reform can get 600 candidates together in the next 6 weeks.
No chance.
They have a prayer, not a prayer. And it'll be either sort of AI candidates again or the usual busload of swivel-eyed loons. And of course, they've also done a lot of damage to their own case by becoming this retirement home for failed Tories. Because how do you present yourself as the party to undo the damage of decades of status quo, when most of the last 20 years worth of status quo was actually inflicted upon us by your own bloody shadow cabinet? That really doesn't make a lick of sense. But I think that's just Farage getting starstruck again. It's just like But
Mitch, Jim and myself, we came to see you in Norwich when you were doing your Tom Lehrer show.
Yeah, that was
And
a good one, Norwich.
that was good. We enjoyed that.
Oh, you
And
might be able to help me out. Can you remember what these subjects were for my halftime song?
It was Anglia Square. There was too many pigeons.
and
Yeah, too
Reform.
many pigeons.
Oh, and Reform taking down the Ukraine flag over County.
That's right. Yes,
Yeah.
yes, that was it. Good. Because I've been putting those songs up on my Patreon, but I managed to not record that one. So I've been trying to remember what it was so I could reconstitute it. So thank you. I may take a crack at that in due course.
We've got a news story recently.
Oh,
so
go on.
so the local Reform MP, he wants to cut all the green strategies and so on and cut costs.
Of course he does. Yeah.
He set up the meeting. It was last week. He had to cancel it. It was too hot. Which was absolute tremendous.
We love it.
Reform news, that wasn't it? Absolutely can't make that shit up, can you?
Sometimes the gods get sarcastic.
Yeah. So you just said about your Patreon. How do you think that sort of changed as a sort of direct to fan model? Is that different to your sort of traditional broadcast radio model?
Well, I suppose it is, but I mean, one of the things, obviously, I was on broadcast radio for a long time. I was on the Now Show for 17 years, which in retrospect was too long. I probably should have knocked it on the head after about 10. But yeah, it was different. I mean, obviously it's different. I mean, I can't knock it. And at the end of the day, it would be unbelievably churlish of me to be, too snarky about the Now Show days. Because let's face it, if I have any kind of profile whatsoever, that's why. Yeah, I mean, but both for good and ill, there are still people who go on at me being, your archetypal, liberal Radio 4 smartass, and I keep pointing out that I haven't actually been on Radio 4 for 10 years now. But whatever. But the thing is, it does make it possible to maintain and develop a relationship directly with your audience, with your fan base, without any of the sort of the gatekeepers of the old broadcast system getting in the way and telling you what you can and can't do, which is lovely. And I'll be honest, it has been keeping the lights on for most of the last, how long did I set it up again? 2017. So yeah, again, it's coming up on 10 years since I've had the Patreon. It's like 2017 I set it up. I set it up basically in the wake of getting kicked off the radio and thinking, okay, well, not only do I need to do something to keep the profile up, I need to do something which keeps me under pressure to write new stuff, because that's one of the good things about the Now Show is that, and the other various bits that I picked up as a result of the Now Show over the years, like, bits of Bremner, Bird and Fortunes, another show we used to do on Radio 2 called It's Been a Bad Week. It's these sort of parallel projects. One of the good things about, all those is that I was under the cosh. I had to keep writing new stuff. I was required to keep writing new stuff, which is good because, it's good to keep refreshing it, to keep working on it, keep refining it, keep coming up with new things, and not just have, the same 20 minutes of jokes the entire career. So that was what's good about it. So I thought I need to do something to kind of synthesize that again. I need to do something to put me in that situation again where I'm obliged to come up with new stuff. And also just a way of sort of maintaining the profile a bit, staying in touch with, the really hard and the hardcore. I've had a couple of sort of little viral hits, as well as the one I had quite early on, because I was very, very fortunate. Again, this was not judgment or foresight on my part, but because I set the Patreon up in 2017, it was already very much a going concern when lockdown hit, and I essentially lived off of it. That and a newspaper column I had at the time, which has since gone away. I basically managed to live on that for the whole of lockdown, because I had friends who were entirely dependent upon gig money, and some of whom ended up, signing on and retraining, because what are you going to do? Our entire industry essentially went away for the best part of a year. But I was very fortunate that I'd set that up, 3 years previously, so it's already going concern. And I also had, with all due sense of irony, something of a viral hit at the beginning of lockdown with a song called Fuck All, which was it was a kind of parody World War I recruiting song, so I did like the whole, Field Marshal Haig poster thing in the video, and because it was all about what occurred to me about lockdown and about how completely ramshackle the first few weeks of lockdown were. It's been all over the place. The irony, I thought, this is really the first time since the Second World War ended that the British people have been called upon collectively by their government to do anything. And the thing they're asking us to do is nothing. And apparently we can't even get it together to do that. Yeah. So I called it a stirring call to inaction. I wrote this song.
Once in every generation, people of our land are called upon by history to bravely take a stand. Patriotic Britons, hear your country call to you. We all must do our duty now, which means we all must do fuck all. All good people, heed your nation's call. A time of national crisis needn't be a time of stress if we have a bit of government-mandated idleness. Fuck all. So diligently on your service call. Indefinitely procrastinate, go back to bed and masturbate as long as you will do. Fuck all. Could do a spot of decorating or some gardening. Hang a picture, put up shelves or other useful thing. Marie Kondo, all your wardrobes, you will be so glad you did. Or finally write your novel. Who we trying to kid will do fuck all. Fuck all. Fuck all. Eat cereal while staring at the wall. It's an easy way to spend a week or 2 or 5 or 6. The time has come for us to chill with or without Netflix. Fuck all. Fuck all. Standing absolutely still and standing tall. Reducing infectivity by ceasing all activity while time slows to a crawl. Fuck all. What will save us when it comes to it is the laziness of your average bit, and we have the wherewithal to do fuck all. Fuck all.
And it went nuts. Didn't so much pick up on YouTube, but certainly, of course, annoyingly, what happens when something goes viral is a lot of the time people just copy and paste it and trim your name off the end.
Yeah.
So, for a while I was doing gigs and I could actually hear the audience go, "Oh, it's that guy." You know what I mean? But that one went crazy. I got 2 pages in the Daily Mail Online about that song, which of course raises the interesting prospect of the readership of Daily Mail Online finding my YouTube page and finding out about everything else I've been saying, and probably go in a bit of a funny colour. But so that bumped up my Patreon numbers just at the beginning of lockdown when I really needed them. And the only time I've had anything like that since about 18 months ago, just after Trump got back in. You may remember he spent his first couple of days signing this big stack of executive orders.
I was going to ask you about this particular.
Varying degrees of nastiness and stupidity. And in a stadium he rented for the very purpose. The man is pure class. And I couldn't help but notice that perhaps the stupidest and nastiest of all these stupid and nasty executive orders was also incredibly clumsily worded, to the point that I think it meant literally the reverse of what he thought it meant. It was his anti-trans order, which said legally everyone is the gender they were at conception. And it was pointed out that depending on how you look at it, at conception, everybody is either female or sexless. But nobody is male until 3 months in. No fetuses become male until after 3 months of gestation. So basically, all men in the world have changed gender at least once already. That is worth pointing out. All men in the world have changed sex at least once already. But also this idea that, okay, so now legally in America, nobody is male because there's no such thing as a male zygote. So I wrote this song called "Everybody in America is Female" and did a video for it.
All hail to Donald Trump, the once and future chief. Crazy motherfuckers everywhere are sighing with relief. After 4 long boring years of sanity, hooray, 'cause it's time to get a working on some seriously fucked up shit. So grab your Sharpie, Mr. T, it's executive order time. Tell those vile transgender people that their lifestyle is a crime. Your gender at conception is the only one for you. But since all embryos are female for the first 6 weeks, it's true that everybody in America's now female. The most feminist of nations, the first country in the world to declare that all its citizens are female. Whatever junk you may be packing, you are legally a girl. So while trans women are women, it is written in cement. That's what the president's order said, so it must be what it meant. Congratulations, Donald Trump, you're the first woman president. 'Cause everyone in America's female now. Excuse me just a moment. I'm a proper scientist. Oh, yeah? The premise of your song's amusing, but you might have missed. Technically, you embryos are neither male nor female yet. I might even say they're genderless. Oh, man, that's even better. Everybody in America's non-binary. So y'all had best get used to calling everybody they. Go put on your gender non-specific finery. And get your your ass on Grindr, cause this also means you're gay. And it's only gender fluid people that this won't affect. I don't know if this was the plan, but hey, when you elect a fucking moron to be president, then what do you expect? And all Americans are non-binary. And let me tell you, siblings, that's just fine with me.
And that one was kind of fascinating because normally I make videos, stick them up on YouTube, they get like 7,000, 8,000, something like that. That one got 500,000 in 48 hours. And my YouTube following went from 5,000 to 25,000 in the space of a week. And most of my, if the comments on the song were anything to go by, most of my new following are indeed American trans and non-binary kids. And on the one hand, it kind of breaks your heart because you can't actually do anything for them. But, if they gave them something to smile at, I suppose that ain't nothing. Because that is it. I did a whole show about this a couple of years ago. And of course, I referred to it at the end of the Lehrer show. This question you're always asking yourself in the sort of the satire business is, does any of this make any difference? Does any of this actually count for anything? Am I just parading my own smart arseness and preaching to, increasingly devout generations of choir? But every now and again, somebody tells you that you did.
Yeah,
You did something that did actually, whether it actually altered the course of bloody history, it just made somebody feel a bit less desperate for a minute. That's worth something,
Absolutely, it is, Mitch, yeah.
So we just talked about Tom Lehrer again. So people who haven't heard of Tom, could you just give a quick overview of who he is and how you discovered him?
Well, I first discovered, so this is the show that I'm touring at the moment. I've still got a few dates left, and I've actually got a few dates after the summer as well. It's called the Lehrer Effect. Tom Lehrer was a maths lecturer at Harvard. Maths prodigy as a kid, got into Harvard age 15, and was a maths lecturer, very young maths lecturer in Harvard in the late 50s, wrote funny songs basically to entertain his pals. Suddenly discovered he was going sort of like weirdly viral, considering it was the late 50s, and became internationally famous as a comedy songwriter right up until the mid 60s, and then he just quit. He was a thing for literally about 8 years, and then he quit, went, screw this, and went back to teaching maths. But in those few short years, he wrote some of the greatest funny songs that have ever been committed to vinyl. They're just, every single one of them's a bloody masterpiece. And I discovered him quite by chance on a cassette that somebody lent me when I was 14 years old. And as such, he's sort of been very, like I said in the show, you kind of feel that the artists you stumble upon, that you discover for yourself, you kind of feel more loyal to those than the ones who are sort of launched at you with great fanfare and publicity. But and so I wanted to do a show about what happened was I've got my Bandcamp site. My wife Kathy and I have had this project on the go for the last couple of years to essentially get everything I've ever written up onto my Bandcamp site, because there was a time that, like I said, in the mid-late noughties, I was writing over 100 songs a year. So I have no idea how many songs I've actually written. But we are in the process of trying to find all of them and put them all up on the Bandcamp site. And they're all themed. Yeah.
How many are on there at the moment?
135 albums. There are 135 albums. Now, there's a bit across. For a start, some of them are just more sort of EPs. They only like 5 or 6 tracks on them. And there's a bit of crossover. Some tracks do turn up on more than one. But there are 135 albums on my Bandcamp site right now of original comedy songs. So they're all up there. It's a Mitch Benn, no gaps, no dots. MITCHBENN. .bandcamp.com. That's my Bandcamp site. But anyway, I put together a collection of some of the songs that I realized were my sort of, because, for all that Tom is an inspiration to me, I've put this out the show, he's kind of a standard to aspire to, rather than somebody to actually try and sound like. Because obviously my stuff does not much sound like Tom. He's a piano player, I'm a guitar player, I'm writing 40 years later, but some of it is fairly obviously Lehrer influence. So I put an album together of those. Then I looked at it and I thought, that's not an album, that's a show. And that's the moment I went, that is a show. And that's what kids, that's what I did it at Edinburgh last. And so I spent the whole of the first half of last year putting this show together, workshopping it, previewing it, and then Tom Lehrer died 3 days before. Now, as I said, it's a bit of a calculated risk doing a show about a guy who was 97 years old. But 3 days before you opened did feel a little bit personal. But I must confess, it did not do us any harm whatsoever in terms of publicity. It really did not. And somebody did actually, I've got this as a line in the show, but somebody did actually ask me, have you got the same PR agency as the movie Conclave? You know? Here's a movie about all the crazy shit that goes down when the Pope died. The Pope has died, you know, and it was literally so. In that respect, it was like he was doing me one last favor on his way out because he put himself in the headlines for the first time in ages, just at the precise moment I needed him there. And it was so. Last year's Edinburgh was fairly triumphant, if I'm honest. Best year I think in numbers, certainly since before lockdown, maybe ever. And also, I was getting because it's very difficult to get attention when you've been going as long as I have, and you're still not on the telly. You know what I mean? And because I get it, I understand that people are sending reporters, whether they're just websites or actual newspapers. If you're sending people up to Edinburgh, you're looking for the new bright young thing. Of course you are. You are not going to waste the column space on that guy who turns up every year and he's usually pretty good. Yeah, he's still pretty good. You're not going to bother. I get that. But I got written up in the Telegraph of all places last year, and that was my first review at Edinburgh in a national daily since 1999.
Wow.
Yeah. Exactly. So, which to me doesn't feel that long ago, but it is.
I struggle to think of the 90s as anything other than a few years.
God, no! It's time. I did a whole show about this. That you called "It's About Time." Where it was my first one back after lockdown, because lockdown, I think, people were beginning to experience time in a very subjective way and really noticing that for the first time in a lot of cases, because the year 2020 seemed to last about 5 times as long as the year before or after it, but nobody could remember anything that happened. It was just like this. But I've had this weird thing happen to me. I think time to me kind of stopped moving in a linear fashion once we were over the millennium. I think if you're Gen X kid, like I was born in 1970, so we spent the first 30 years of my life crawling towards this vast numerical monolith on the horizon. There was, oh my God, the years are going to start with a 2. You know what I mean? It was this
change our lives.
Exactly, but in one way or another, it felt like this vast kind of watershed that we were inching towards, that was going to make sort of change everything, and we couldn't really tell how. And so you were kind of measuring time almost by how close to that you were getting. And then the minute we were the other side of it, it's like we're standing in this vast open expanse of shapeless time. There's no sense of forward movement anymore. Do you know what I mean? So I think about stuff that happened in 2002, and it doesn't feel any longer ago than stuff that happened in 2021.
Yeah.
So, Mitch, you mentioned the Lehrer show a couple of times.
Yeah.
I want to link this back as well to the positive time. You mentioned on that about autism and your son's diagnosis.
Yeah.
And the fact that you suddenly occurred to you that maybe, just maybe, this might explain some of your previous life.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of, it's what's becoming increasingly apparent. It's, people are saying, they'll diagnose anybody these days. No, it's just we're realizing that it's a hell of a lot more prevalent than we ever thought it was. I mean, you got to remember that, when we were kids, I think we're all of a similar-ish kind of age. When we were kids, autism meant that you couldn't talk and you sat in the corner and banged your head on the wall.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's what autism meant in the 70s. Pausing occasionally to draw Philadelphia for a memory.
Yeah.
And then you went back to banging your head on the wall. But that's what autism meant. The idea that it could just be a slightly different interpretation of the sensory input that you're getting that most people have, that just didn't really occur to people. But it's once Mika was diagnosed and I suddenly start to think about my own childhood and my own life, and, suddenly everything started to make a little more sense than it had done previously. Why I could be savant levels good at some stuff and so bewilderingly hopeless at others. That's what my previous year's show was about, the world's cleverest idiot. It's about the different kinds of intelligence and how, you can be, like I say, sort of, Einstein level genius at some things and just like bewilderingly crap at others,
and for you, where lots of little puzzles all came together and made one big picture.
Yeah, it did start. And and the other thing is, I got the joint ADHD diagnosis, like every other blood man, and that has become increasingly apparent the massive preponderance of neurodivergence in the comedy industry. But then that kind of makes sense because this is something I dealt with in a show I did a few years ago about how it's almost impossible to have a completely original thought if your brain works the same way as everybody else's.
Absolutely.
Where are you getting it from? You're only exposed to all the same stimuli as everybody everybody else. You're only receiving the same information and input as everybody else. So how do you look at all that and then suddenly go, oh, now I've thought of something that nobody's ever thought of before? How does that even work? So ultimately, it's part of it has to be a processing variation, because I mean, it's the way they used to think it was happening was, of course, some supernatural entity beamed it directly into your head, which is what inspiration literally means. It means breath, it means breathing in. It means somebody, the idea that the gods breathe this idea into your skull, or you're basically seeing and hearing the same shit as everybody else, but you're just interpreting it in a different way. You're processing it in a different way, and you're coming up with a different angle on it than anybody else. Because at the end of the day, if anybody could do this, we wouldn't need comedians.
No.
We wouldn't need the comedy industry. I mean, everybody's got a sense of humor. Most people can crack a joke, but to actually be able to produce this stuff on a regular basis, on a professional basis, to be presented with a task of you've got to write this and it's got to be funny. I mean, that is not a skill that everybody possesses. So it's interesting, and indeed perhaps to be expected that there turns out to be this preponderance of high functioning, I'd say, neurodivergence amongst comedy people, because where else are we getting it from? If we were only having the same thoughts as everybody else, or we're interpreting it the same, then anybody could do this. But apparently not everybody can, because people pay money to go and see you do it. People pay money to go and see you recite these ideas you've had, or people go to pay money to go and see, so if it wasn't in some way, literally a sort of a tradable commodity, if humor was just completely standard, if everybody could do it to the same kind of levels, then, so evidently not everybody can do it to the same kind of level. So what is it about the people who can? I'm sorry, I've kind of vanished down a bit of a
no, that's fine.
No.
I just wondered if, having made this connection in your head and with these ADHD diagnoses becoming more and more common, does it make you feel, I don't know, any sort of different, maybe kinder to your younger self, where you didn't have that realization?
I've always been quite kind to my younger self, as of anything, and there's some people are going to probably find this a bit worrying. It's made me kinder to my present self.
Okay.
I have finally acknowledged that it's okay not to be good at everything. Now, I know everybody else already knew that, but I only figured it out about 3 years ago. Literally. Because I was a bit of a child prodigy when I was a kid. I was taught myself to read by the time I was 2. I tended to come top in things. Not PA, not PE, not sport, everything else. But I did, and then I went to this very competitive grammar school when I was like 11, and I thought, well, this should level things off a bit. But then the weird thing is, I genuinely seem to be getting more and more mediocre as I get older. But because of course everybody eventually catches up to you, because you're not really a genius, you're just advanced. You just figured shit out before the people did. It didn't afford you to a level of insight that they were never going to acquire. It took them a while to catch up with you, but by the time you're sort of 17, 18, everybody's on more or less the same kind of level. But what it left me with is it's left me with this idea that it's not okay to be not good at things. Whereas everybody else knows that, because most people were crap at all kinds of stuff when they were a kid, and really, apart from sports, I wasn't. And so it's left me with this sort of feeling that I'm supposed to be good at everything, and I really beat myself up about the stuff that I'm not good at. I mean, something which kind of exacerbates that is the fact that I've never been convinced of the worth of the things that I am good at. The things that I'm especially good at are incredibly trivial. I had this routine once that when the end comes and the few Dracula's left alive, I'm going to be the one that everybody eats. Because my skills that have served me thus far will be no use whatsoever after the bomb drops.
I don't know, Mitch. We're going to need a laugh.
Well, I don't know. Anyway, but the point I'm trying to make is that whereas now I've finally acknowledged that there's all kinds of stuff I'm rubbish at, and that it's okay to be rubbish at things. And because that's the trouble, because that exacerbates it, because you end up in this weird sort of cycle of guilt and avoidance, where I mean, my thing is my executive function, my ability to deal with bureaucracy and admin has always been very poor. And during lockdown, it basically went away and has never really properly come back, and to the point where I just became almost kind of envelope phobic. You know what I mean? And the trouble with that is you can get yourself into terrible trouble because you end up in this cycle of guilt and avoidance. So every time you think about all the shit that you're supposed to be on top of and you're not, that makes you feel bad. So you push it further to the back of your mind, which means the next time it's forced to the back of you in front of your mind would say, you feel even worse about it because you still haven't done anything about it. So you cram it even further to the back of your mind. And so you get into this terrible cycle of guilt and avoidance. And ultimately, the only natural way, the only inevitable way of getting out of that is crisis. Eventually, you whatever it is you haven't dealt with actually bites you in the ass. It becomes something that you are now legally required to deal with. But my wife Kathy has been immensely helpful with that, because what we try and do is we try and do each other's, because she's got stuff that she maybe hasn't dealt with for a long time, and it's built up this terrible layers and layers of guilt and avoidance, where I come along and I don't give a shit. So I'm just like, screw it, let's just do it. So I just pile in there and do it, because it's not that the task is any easier for me, but I haven't built up all these layers of resistance to it.
Yeah.
And then she will help me with all my stuff, because she will just look at this, this mountain of bloody, unanswered post or whatever. Just go, fuck it, let's just do it. And I'm like, but then she just rub it. And basically what she does is filters through it all and then presents me with the 4 out of this stack of like 30 that actually require my attention in some way, and then we just do it. But that is terrible. But one of the things which has helped is the fact that I am not beating myself up so much about my inevitable shortcomings, because everybody has them. And I kind of expected myself not to. I've always thought, no. I have this extraordinary intellect and I should be able to do anything I turn my mind to. And this is like, well, actually, no, you don't. You have a pretty good mind, but not particularly efficient brain, and there's all kinds of stuff which you're actually not very good at all.
Is this Mitch? Is this Mitch? How you became a sci-fi novelist? Did you just jump in?
No, that was. I mean, oddly enough, that was one of the few. Because one of the weird things is, I never saw. I did not anticipate being a comedian. But to be honest, I had no idea. I had a few ideas what I wanted to be when I was a kid. I've been talking about this with my stepson just today, actually, because he's at a similar kind of thing. He's doing his BTEC and he's thinking about changing course. And we're talking about the fact that I really had no idea what I wanted to do at all. I had a fairly shrewd idea I was going to go to university from the age of about 13. I knew what I was going to do when I got there. I knew that I was going to do languages for no reason other than I was good at languages, and it meant I was going to get to live abroad for a year. So it's just like, hell yes. And then from the age of 17 onwards, I knew which university it was going to be. I knew it was going to be Edinburgh. And then at the age of 22, I popped out the end of Edinburgh University. I'm like, now what the fuck am I doing? And I realized I'd basically been on a rail for my entire life, right up to June 1992. And then suddenly I pop off the end of this rail. I'm like, and there could be another 60 years of this shit, and I don't know what I'm supposed to do with any of it, and it's genuinely quite bewildering. Because my problem was always that I was quite good at a bunch of stuff. Like I say, all completely bloody trivial stuff, but I was quite good at a bunch of things. I spent a lot of time in the theatre. I wasn't a bad musician. I knew I was a pretty good writer. And I'm thinking, what do I want to do? And people would always say, pick one. And I'm like, which fucking one? How do I know that, the week I wasn't, the week after I decided to devote myself to music wasn't the week before I was going to get cast in the new Guy Ritchie movie. So, you know what I mean? And it's like, I don't fucking know, and so I thought my idea was, if I just try and keep as many irons in the fire for as long as possible, events will figure this out for me, and they kind of did. It's just that, I kind of fell into comedy by accident in the early 90s. And then it turns out, particularly comedy songwriting. And it turned out that I was pretty good at it, which made sense because it was a combination of various other things I was quite good at. And then people started paying me to do it. And suddenly I thought, well, I guess this is what I do now. And of course, fortunately, what I've been able to do over the years is kind of, parlay that back into doing the other things. But writing sci-fi was something I wanted to do when I grow up, and it kind of came about as an odd sort of mental process where I was just thinking about the sort of the fish out of water stories, like the Jungle Book and Tarzan. Tarzan and the Jungle Book is exactly the same story, just one's a kid's fable and one's a boy's own adventure. But in every other regard, it's the same story. Superman is another example of it. And I was thinking, I wonder what this is all, because I mean, obviously Moses is kind of an example of it. I was thinking, I wonder how far back this goes. And then I thought, well, okay, Superman is kind of a vaguely science fiction inflected version of this concept. What would be the pure sci-fi version of this concept? And I thought, human baby abducted by aliens grows up on another planet.
Mm.
And then I thought, has anybody written that? And I spent quite a few, this back in about 2010. I spent weeks Googling it and could not find any trace of anybody having written essentially the sci-fi version of the Jungle Book, and I could not find any example of this anywhere. And so I thought, and just started tinkering with it. And then a few months later, when I already had some notes and some fake structure for this book about a human baby that's abducted by a well-meaning but misguided alien who then adopts her. I wanted to make a female because all these other ones had male protagonists. I thought, adopts her and raises her as his own child on his home planet. And I thought, and then I was in town in 2011, and I had to get my eldest kid's passport renewed because they'd only had the 6-month baby passport up until then. Now, they won't let you do this anymore because people have been, divorced dads have been given the kid for the weekend and then got him a passport and fucked off out of the country. So they're not letting you do that anymore. But there is a way of renewing a grown-up passport in one day. You book the appointment. It costs extra, but it basically speeds everything up. And by the end of the day, you've got the damn thing in your hand, instead of waiting for it to turn up in the post and wondering if it's going to, and looking at the day you're going on holiday getting closer and closer. But at the time, they would still let you do that for kids' passports. I needed to renew my eldest passport. So went into town, passport offices around the back of Victoria Station, went into town, handed all the documents in at like 11 in the morning, got a bit of paper, said, come back and get these at like 3. Now, where I was living at the time, it's actually where I'm living now. It takes about an hour and a half to get it in the middle of town on public transport. So I thought, there's no point going home because I'll get to sit down for 20 minutes and have to come back. Right. So I went on, and this back was when Twitter was still new and lovely. This is 2011.
Yeah,
before
nice.
Before it became Elon's fascist revenge porn emporium. Yeah. But anyway,
Is that what X stands for? Never knew.
stands for all kinds of things, none of which you should say out loud. But anyway, this is back when Twitter was nice. So I went on Twitter and I said, "Hey, Hive Mind, I'm stranded in central London for about 4 hours. Suggestions for things I might do." And I thought people would come back and say, go and have lunch at this place, go to this exhibition. Gollancz Publishing came back with, come and talk to us about writing a science fiction book.
Wow.
And I looked at this and I thought, all right, you cheeky bastards, let's try and see what happens. So I had a quick Google, found out where their office is, went up to the front desk and said, find out who does Gollantz's Twitter feed and tell them that Mitch Benn's turned up.
Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic.
And it turned out to be this guy called Simon Spanton, who at the time was an editor for Gollancz. We got talking and we ended up, it took months to sort the deal out, but we sorted this deal out. And I got signed up for 2 books. Yeah. And I delivered the first one in 2012. It came out in 2013.
That's Terror.
That's Terror. Terror is the name of the little girl who gets adopted by aliens. He names her after her home planet. And Terror came out in 2013 and was very, very well received. It had rapturous reviews in the Independent and the Times. It got it the Guardian's top 10 sci-fi of the year. By the time it came out, I'd already basically written and submitted the sequel. Now, I actually said at the time we were doing the deal, should we maybe better make the second book something unconnected with this in case the first book doesn't happen? And Simon Medder said, no, make it book 2 in the 2. Because this is, just coming out of the Harry Potter bit, right? It's going to make it much easier to get it into the shops if we can tell them it's part 1, So I went, okay, wrote book 2. Book 2 came out in 2014. Now, at the time, I've got a manager. His name's Ian Wilson. He's been my manager in general since like 1999. That's not quite the same thing as an agent. It does a lot of the same work as an agent. It's not quite an agent. And all my newfound author pals, because I've been hanging out with authors all, going to various book fairs and stuff, and really loving it. It has to be said. I mean, it kind of felt like a world I'd always wanted to belong to. All my author friends, and indeed all my people, my friends who are working in kept telling me, "You need to get a literary agent. You need to get a literary agent. You need to get a literary agent." And this author friend of mine referred me to a very high-powered. Okay, that's maybe bit more than two, but what the hell? They were a big enough deal to go through. And I signed up with this literary agent just as the second book was coming out. And they did have a London office, but the woman who was running the London office, for various kind of personal reasons, wasn't there for most of the next year. She had a couple of family tragedies, couldn't hold it against her, whatever. So I ended up having to try and deal with the woman who actually runs the whole agency in New York. And she's the kind of person that you have to make an appointment 2 or 3 weeks in advance before you phone her. You know what I mean? It's that kind of a big deal. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I signed up with this situation and I thought, let's see what happens next. And suddenly they didn't renew the deal. The deal had only ever been for 2 books, and suddenly they didn't renew it. And I have never really managed to get a decent explanation out of anybody as to why not. I've never really managed to get. I don't think it was about lousy sales, because book 1 had sold really well, and book 2 had literally only just come out, so it hadn't had time to not sell well.
Sure.
I mean, in the end, I don't think book 2 sold hardly anything, because they pretty much gave up on it the minute it came out.
But we got the trilogy.
We did. We got the third book, which I think you self-published, didn't you?
That was what I ended up doing. And I had to get down off my high horse a bit, because this did leave me in an almost impossible situation, because nobody's going to sign you up to publish part 3 of a trilogy. Nobody's going to sign you up to reprint parts 1 and 2 of a trilogy that's just been with somebody else, and which has now ostensibly failed, purely in order to publish part 3 of a trilogy. So, and I was talking to these agents for a while, and I was saying, what the hell do I do now? And they said, well, look, what we need to do is get something else published, and then once we kind of reestablish your authorial bona fides, in due course, we'll try and get the territory completed. Okay. So worked for an idea on this kind of YA dystopian thing. And then a movie was announced, the exact same plot, so I had to abandon that. Although, interestingly, that movie never came out. And then I had this idea. They started saying things like, well, you know how well David Manning is. But anyway, they said, well, you know how really well David Williams, his kids' books sell. Maybe you should try writing something like that. And I thought to myself, these guys in New York, do they know why David Williams' stuff sells as well as it does? I mean, it's all perfectly serviceable post-Roald Dahl, kid stuff, but he's literally one of the most famous guys in the country. This is when he was on the panel of Britain's Got Talent, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. He has an insane... And I have observed sometimes Americans can't really get their heads around the idea that somebody can be famous just in their own country.
Okay.
Like, how angry were the Americans that we dared to make a movie about Robbie Williams?
Yeah.
I mean, if they weren't just confused, they were indignant. How dare you presume to make a celebrity biopic about somebody we've never heard of? You know what I mean? They seemed genuinely angry that there was a movie about a rock star that they'd never heard of, and that somehow the fact that they'd never heard of him meant he couldn't possibly be a rock star. So I'm thinking to myself, do these people get just how big a deal David is? That and anyway, I can never quite get an answer out of them. Then bizarrely, my ex-wife now, who I'm still married to at the time, but it was kind of in the process of going a bit wrong. She actually found herself at a dinner with one of these people from this agency, and they explained that the reason they kept harping on about David Wellington, they were perfectly aware of the fact that his stuff sold because he was massively famous, at least because that was at least as much the reason his stuff was selling as how good it was. But the point they were making was those books are incredibly slim. Those books are all only about like 80 pages each, which means that the kids, they all want the new one, but it only takes you about, a week of bedtimes to get through one. Yeah. And he can only write them at the rate of about 2 a year. So that leaves about 48 weeks a year when there isn't a new David Wanney's book, and everybody's kids want a new David Wanney's book. And I thought, okay, I get it. I understand that. So I wrote them a bunch of treatments for here you go. Here's an idea for a series of kids' books aimed at that kind of market. But in the meantime, I'd suggested, the other idea I'd suggested was, I've got an idea for a kind of a YA fantasy set in this kind of very mysterious world, but it's written in this made-up language. It's not an entirely made-up language. It's an obviously devolved kind of English, a bit like Pidgin. You know what I mean? It's written in this kind of devolved, primitive form of English. And they were like, yeah, we're not sure about that, but keep working on that idea. We'd like to see it. And so after I sent them these agents of mine this idea for all these pitches for a series of books, a bit like David Wanners, they went, yeah, whatever. we were talking about that, and I'm like, Jesus, you asked me to come up with this. You're not even going to tell me whether you think it's any good. Okay, fine. So I pitched them the idea of this YA novel written in a made-up language, and they went, yeah, we really hate the idea of it being written in a made-up language. There's no way we can sell that. You have to change that. And I said, well, it's kind of an integral part of the story, because part of the point of the book is you're wondering, why are they speaking in this degraded form of English? Why is this? And of course, in the end, you will discover why this society speaks this kind of degraded English. And they're like, yeah, no, sorry, we think that's a terrible idea, but you're going to have to change that. And I went, well, it's kind of the whole point of the book. And so they said, right, well, we can't work with you anymore. So they dropped me.
Oh.
And I thought, oh, okay. And then about 6 months later, an old friend of mine called Liz Hyder, who used to work for BBC Publicity, published a YA novel written in a degraded English language called Bearmouth, and won all kinds of awards.
Well, there we are. What can you do?
And I'm like, I really need to stick to my bloody guts. But at the end, I thought, okay, what I need to do is this. First of all, I don't have to listen to those guys anymore. So I'm going to write part 3. I'm going to write the bloody thing. And once it's done, then I'll figure out what the hell are we going to do with it. Because by now, it was like, it was lockdown by now. I think it was like, it's certainly going into lockdown. And I thought, right, well, this way at least, a lot of water was passed under a lot of bridges since the first 2 came out. But in the end, it became apparent. At the time, I was going out with a lady who's I'd already split up with my first wife by then. But I was going out with a lady whose background was in marketing, which I found kind of interesting because they are marketing and, if you like, everything I do are 2 completely non-overlapping, but ultimately quite complementary skill sets. And she did a bit of research and she realized that basically these days, if you're willing to spend a bit of money, maybe about £1,000 all told, on various services, like somebody to proofread it, somebody to do the artwork, then you can now do a self-published book, the end result of which will be pretty much indistinguishable from the real thing, and so we do, okay, sod it. So I reprinted books 1 and 2, got the rights back to books 1 and 2, with new artwork, which have got this, actually I spoke to them just recently, so thankfully they're okay, Ukrainian art studio. This is before the invasion, obviously. And they did these beautiful covers, which are sort of proper kind of pulpy sci-fi covers. The Galant's covers, I was never that keen on. They're a bit tasteful. Whereas these are sort of almost kind of like the cover of, old analog magazines from the 60s. You know what I mean?
The old Edgar Rice Burroughs.
Yeah. So they go almost comic book, but sort of proper kind of pulpy sci-fi covers. And I got books 1 or 2 reprinted. And then what happened was I actually got the patrons to be my editors. I got a bunch of patrons to volunteer to be, if you like, the beta team. And I sent them all out the first draft in return for, you need to give me notes on this when you're done. And that very much helped me in writing the second draft, which is a lot better than the first draft. The third book came out 2021. And I finally got the audiobook for book 3 out literally about 6 weeks ago. That took me a hell of a long time. So I managed to buy the masters of the audiobooks off of Orion, who are the parent company of Gallant. So I was able to resubmit those as the audiobooks, but under my own imprint. But the original recordings from like 2012, 2013. But obviously there was no offer. So I tried to do it at home, and it turned out to be technically very, very difficult to get it actually up to audiobook standards. And then I was brought in to narrate somebody else's audiobook, and it happened in this little studio in Acton. And I thought, oh, this would be ideal. So I talked to the guys running it, what do you charge by the day? So I thought, I can come in here and get book 3 done in 2 days. So I did that. And finally, we did the overdub of the music cues I wrote for it and, put the titles on and everything. And the audio book of the book 1's called Terror, book 1, 2 is called Terror's World, and book 3 is called Terror's War. And the audiobook of Terror's War finally came out about 6 weeks ago. So that trilogy is now as complete as it can be, until somebody buys the movie rights.
So where can we hear this, Mitch?
They're on Audible.
Okay.
I know. Yeah, I know. But the thing about Audible is, it's one of those things that it's kind of either on Audible or it's nowhere. I think I may be able to put them up on my own site as well, but Audible get really arsy if they're available anywhere else.
Okay.
So I might see if there's a way. If there's a way, yeah, they do. But that's how you run a monopoly, isn't it?
couple of last things just to wrap up. So, what would you say is one thing that people are too pessimistic about?
Human nature. I think given the opportunity to be good, we generally are. I think we keep being told that we are more selfish and more scared and more cynical than we really are, because ultimately it suits the billionaires to have us scared, selfish, and cynical, because that makes us easier to manipulate. It makes us easier to control if we live in a constant fear. But, it is in our nature to help each other out. We are, if we, and this, this runs up against all kinds of political objections, and indeed occasionally theological objections. The idea that, no, we are base and animalistic in nature, and it's only because we are having this sort of, defined moral code being constantly imposed upon us, and we live under the constant fear of eternal torment, that we ever don't do the wrong thing. That's bullshit, right? Because if that were the case, we never would have made it out the fucking trees.
Yeah.
Okay. And all these guys about, it's all about rugged individualism. Well, great, you go off and be a rugged individual, but you're still benefiting from the collective efforts of everybody around you. The rugged individualists, when we were living in the caves, lasted 15 minutes and got hit by a bear. You know what I mean? That's what happened to the rugged individualists in the whichever geological period that was, in the bit which, at the beginning of 2001, the rugged individualist didn't last very long. So this idea that somehow, altruism is somehow inexplicable in evolutionary terms, it's not. It's essential in evolutionary terms. We wouldn't last. We wouldn't have survived this long, or we certainly wouldn't have become that which we have become, but exist at the level of sophistication that we do, had we not understood that we last longer and prosper better and flourish better when we help each other out than when we fuck each other over.
Yeah,
it's just we if we fuck each other over, we all die.
Yeah.
If we help each other out, that's why what. Oh yeah. My good lady wife Kathy has just stuck around in there. This is my garage, incidentally. It's full of books. I have the pseudo intellectual bookcase backdrop. That's very important. But Kathy was just reminded me there was a, they keep finding dead guys in a class here. Remarkably well-preserved dead guys in the class. Well, they found one not so long ago, dug him out and examined him and discovered that he had a broken femur, but that his femur had healed. He had a broken and set femur. There was a big break in his femur, but his femur had healed. And they could basically establish from studying the break that not only had his leg healed, but he'd lived for about another 20 years after his leg healed, which meant this guy suffered what should have been a fatal injury. You break your femur, you die. You are helpless. You're immobile. You lie there whimpering and then get eaten by a bear. You know what I mean? It's as simple as that. Somebody looked after him long enough for his leg to heal and for him to get mobile again and for him to live into at least early middle age. And this was, how old was it? About, it wasn't millions of years, but it was certainly like, a good couple of 100,000 years, I think. Yeah. Way earlier than we have any notion of humans existing in any kind of society. Yeah, so the fact is, obviously, at the very least, we were looking after each other. Maybe this guy had some particular importance to whatever his tribe was. I don't know. But the fact is, he was, in purely animalistic terms, doomed. And somebody he will have needed to have been fed for months. Somebody will have to have been bringing food to him. Somebody, and sort of helping him get anywhere if he needs to go anywhere. People will have to be, lifting him up and carrying him very gingerly around. Also, it appears that somebody figured out how to set a broken bone.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing, isn't it?
So this is the point. Yeah. It is in our nature to help each other out. It is not in our nature to fuck each other over. We just keep being told it is because it suits the needs of late-stage capitalism to fuck each other. And I think we are too pessimistic about ourselves. We are better than we keep being told we are. And I think given the opportunity to do the right thing, if there are not barriers placed in the way of doing the right thing, people will do the right thing.
Yeah.
Just because I think they know it's the right thing to do. I mean, morality is not complicated. There was I mentioned this in the show I did years ago called "Don't Believe a Word." There was I don't know exactly what his field is. I think some kind of anthrozoologist called Franz Wahl, who did experiments with capuchin monkeys, right? And he's got a capuchin monkey in a glass box, and the floor of the box is covered in pebbles of different sizes. The front wall of the box is full of holes, right? And the monkey looks at the pebbles and thinks, well, there's obviously some kind of point to this. So he picks one of the pebbles up and sticks them out the hole. And every time he puts a pebble through the hole, that nice Mr. Scientist gives him a bit of cucumber. Right?
Okay. Yeah.
So now he's incentivized. Oh, okay, let's stick more pebbles through more holes, more bits of cucumber. And he's quite happy doing this for quite a while. There is an adjacent glass box. In the glass box now is put monkey number 2. Monkey number 2 similarly watches monkey number 1 pushing the holes out, push the pebbles out of the holes, and being rewarded with cucumber. Whereupon monkey number 2 puts a pebble out the hole and is rewarded with a grape. Right? Monkey number 1, seeing the grape, eagerly shoves another pebble out the hole and gets cucumber again. He looks at it and throws it at the scientist. Now, monkey number 1 was perfectly okay with cucumbers until this bastard got a grape, right? So he is incensed, not because he is being poorly treated, but because he is being unfairly treated, which suggests that even capuchin monkeys have some rudimentary sense of justice, right? They know when they're being not badly treated, unfairly treated. There's not wrong with cucumbers until number 2 got a grape. You see what I mean? Why does this bastard get a grape when
If only Donald Trump could get himself to the level of a capuchin.
If only Donald Trump will collapse live on TV into a fizzing pile of suppurating organs. Yes.
Well, I think that's a
I
great
want him
place.
to go out like that guy in RoboCop. That's all I want. Live in the Oval Office. I want him to just finally lose all structural integrity and just become this putter. Because, of course, what will happen is they'll scrape him up into a bucket and then insist that this is all part of the plan.
Give him his third term.
Yeah, exactly. Just because the president's just a pile of noxious goo doesn't mean he's not a great American.
Would we notice a difference is the question. I think that's a really good place for us to wrap it up. This.
I hear the feds knocking at my door as we
That's if we ever want to be able to go to America again.
Well, this is it. The thing is, I had a show about the Beatles. I was actually talking with the producer in New York about maybe taking it to New York. That's not going to happen for a while. The people are being basically, turned away at the airport if they've ever said anything mean about Trump on Twitter. I have an entire album of Trump can go fuck himself songs on Bandcamp.
If any of his advisors have even listened to any of these shows, then we're not going anywhere near.
It's just got up on Spotify. My Trump can go fuck himself album is on Spotify.
Fantastic! Excellent. There you go. So, listeners, get yourself on there because that sounds like an absolute must listen. Mitch, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
I'm very rarely indulged to this extent.
Not at all.
Somebody's usually told me to shut the fuck up by now.
So, listeners, if you've enjoyed this episode, and I'm sure you have, you can get yourself onto Mitch's website, mitchbenn.com.
It is, mitchbenn.com. And again, my amazing good lady wife, Kathy, has overhauled it recently to the point where they're now pretty much direct links to all the weird shit I'm doing. It's got plugs to all the shows I'm working on, except for one, which is still kind of a bit under wraps, but there will be announcements about that in due course.
We will keep for that.
Yeah.
So, please subscribe, leave us a 5-star review, tell your friends, family, passing strangers. Statistically speaking, none of you will, but we live in hope, don't we? If you'd like to get
can I plug my podcast while I'm here? Can I quickly?
Please do, Mitch.
Completely forgot that I got one. My podcast is called "We Know a Song About That, Don't We?" Because I've been writing satirical songs for 30 years, so I've written songs about pretty much everything which does happen or can happen. So I talk about what's happened in the news this week, and then I play you the song I wrote last time.
Fantastic. Well worth a listen. I subscribe to Mitch's podcast. I've done for a while. Although, if any of you go on there and like and subscribe to that, well, you're not doing it to ours. I should be very cross with you.
Yes, so will I.
We will be back next week with our usual blend of good news, questionable jokes, Three people desperately trying to convince each other that humanity might just be getting the hang of all this nice stuff. Until then, look after yourselves, look after each other, and remember that everything is fine. Probably.
The following is a heartfelt message to all my friends and family. I know you think of me as someone to rely on, a helping hand or just a shoulder to cry on. Though I'm glad you feel that way, there's something I should say. I'm afraid I won't be there for you this Saturday. 'Cause call me during Doctor Who and I'll kill you. Leave me in peace if you want to survive. As far as you're concerned, I'm incommunicado. 7 p.m. till 7:45. I'm all yours again come Sunday morning. Although my conversation may be rather boring. All week long I swear I'll be as helpful as can be. But Saturday night you'd better stay the hell away from me. 'Cause call me during Doctor Who and I'll kill you. 16 years I've been waiting for this. Call me during Doctor Who and I'll kill you. Don't even think about ringing just to take the call me during Doctor Who and I'll kill you. I'm not kidding, look me right in the face. Call me during Doctor Who and I'll kill you. Saturday night I need some time and space.